The crystal chandeliers above the ballroom caught every flicker of light, scattering it across silk gowns and polished shoes. I stood just inside the entrance, my hand brushing the smooth fabric of my midnight blue dress, its fitted bodice making me stand taller than I felt. Across the room, I spotted them. Madison, Claire, and Jenna, my friends from another lifetime. They glanced my way for half a second before turning back to their champagne flutes, their laughter perfectly timed to pretend I wasn't there. A familiar pang tugged at my chest, sharp but dulled, like an old scar you've learned to live with. I could smell the faint sweetness of gardenias, mixed with expensive perfume. Somewhere near the stage, a string quartet played a slow, elegant waltz. My phone buzzed in my clutch, but I didn't check it. Then, a ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Mayor Jonathan Reeves, tall and commanding in his tailored suit, stepped up to the microphone. His eyes swept over the room until they landed on me and didn't move. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice deep and steady, "tonight, I am honored to welcome our very special VIP guest." Dozens of heads turned. Cameras lifted. My so-called friends froze. Miss Emily Carter. The sound of my name filled the room like a spotlight. The sound of my name echoing in that ballroom pulled me backward in time, 5 years, maybe more, when I was still just to them. It was another party, smaller but louder, hosted in Madison's parents' lake house. I'd worn a thrift store dress I'd altered myself, stitches uneven at the hem, but made with hours of care. The moment I walked in, I knew I didn't belong. "Cute," Claire had said back then, her smile thin and sharp as glass. "Is that vintage?" The way she said it made vintage sound like a disease. The night only spiraled from there. They'd huddled in corners, whispering, breaking into laughter whenever I got close. At one point, I'd been reaching for a drink when Madison slid the tray just out of reach, offering it to someone else with a smirk. My cheeks burned so hot, I thought my skin might blister. I remember retreating to the deck outside, shivering under the string lights that hummed faintly in the cold air. My hands were trembling, not from the breeze, but from holding back tears. That's when Grandma Louise called. She never asked if I was okay. She just said, "Emily, there's going to be a day when you walk into a room and they will have no choice but to notice you. Until then, keep building yourself." Quietly. Before we hung up, she reminded me about the bracelet she'd given me on my 18th birthday, thin gold, with a tiny engraved star. "It's not for luck," she'd said. "It's to remind you that you make your own light." I looked at it then, the metal warm from my skin, and made a promise to myself. I wouldn't waste another breath trying to fit into their circle. The very next week, I stopped going to their events, stopped answering late-night come-out texts. I picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop, saved every tip, and signed up for evening classes in political communications. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I'd never again stand in a room feeling small because of them. That was the night the old M quietly disappeared, making room for the woman they wouldn't recognize until it was far too late. The first months were the hardest. My days started before sunrise, brewing lattes for the morning rush, and ended well past midnight, hunched over textbooks in my tiny studio apartment. Political communications wasn't exactly glamorous, but something about the strategy, the art of words and timing, lit a fire in me. One night, after class, I stayed behind to ask Professor Daniels about an assignment. She was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of presence that made people stop talking when she entered a room. She listened as I explained my project idea, then said simply, "Emily, you have an instinct for this. Don't waste it." She became my first real mentor, introducing me to small volunteer opportunities, local campaign offices, city council events, community fundraisers. I learned how to write speeches that moved people, how to read a room, and how to anticipate the unspoken. It wasn't easy. I battled imposter syndrome daily. There were nights I stared at my reflection in the dark window, wondering if I was just pretending to be someone important. But then an email would come in. "Thank you for your work. We couldn't have done this without you." And I'd push forward. My first big break came when a councilwoman I'd volunteered for recommended me to a mayoral campaign team. It wasn't for the pay because, Trust me, it barely covered rent. It was for the experience. I started as an assistant, but within 6 months, I was writing key talking points for live debates. When our candidate won, the team celebrated at a crowded bar. I slipped out early, choosing instead to walk home under the glow of streetlights, the gold star bracelet catching faint reflections. No Instagram post, no look at me moment. Just quiet satisfaction. Over the years, I took on bigger projects, advising policy campaigns, managing high-profile charity galas, connecting with influential donors. I learned to navigate rooms full of people who underestimated me, often using that to my advantage. Meanwhile, my old friends kept living their curated lives online, filtered brunch photos, weekend getaways, girls' night, selfies that felt more like PR campaigns than friendship. Once in a while, Madison or Jenna would send a casual message, "We should hang out sometime." But I always replied vaguely, the way you would to someone you barely remembered from high school. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. What they didn't know, what no one from that part of my life knew, was that I had become one of the city's most sought-after political consultants. My client list included senators, CEOs, and, yes, the mayor himself. Still, I kept my life private. No flashy posts, no magazine features. I preferred to let my work speak for itself. But when the mayor's office insisted I attend his annual fundraising gala, not as staff, but as his official guest, I knew the night would hold possibilities. And when I saw Madison, Claire, and Jenna on the guest list, I couldn't help but smile. The gala had been in full swing for nearly an hour before the mayor called my name. As the applause swelled, I made my way to the stage, my heels clicking against the marble floor like deliberate punctuation marks. The spotlight warmed my skin, but my focus wasn't on the crowd. It was on the 3 frozen faces in the back of the room. Emily Carter, Mayor Reeves continued, has been instrumental in shaping some of the most impactful community policies our city has seen in the last decade. She's not only a brilliant strategist, but also a champion for local businesses, education reform, and women's leadership. Every word was like a ribbon being cut, separating my past from my present. From the stage, I could see Madison's champagne glass hovering midair, Claire's lips parting just slightly, Jenna whispering something that made Madison's brows knit together. They didn't clap until the people around them did. The mayor gestured toward the elegantly set table in front, my table, where my name card sat beside his. Gold-embossed, heavy stock, the kind you don't throw away. When I stepped down, he leaned over and said quietly, "You've earned every bit of this. Let them wonder." I didn't have to wonder long. By the time dessert arrived, Madison was making her way toward me, smile wide, voice pitched just a little too high. "Emily, oh my gosh, it's been forever. You look amazing. What have you been up to?" I took a sip of sparkling water, letting the pause stretch just long enough to be noticeable. "Working," I said finally, "mostly behind the scenes. You know, policy work, campaign strategy." Claire appeared next to her, clutching her clutch like it might save her. "So, you work with the mayor?" "I advise him," I replied, placing my napkin neatly on the table, along with several other elected officials. "It keeps me busy." Jenna joined, trying for casual. "We had no idea you were in politics." "That's because I don't post about it," I said, my tone even. "I've found the work is more rewarding when it's not about the performance." Their eyes darted between each other, searching for a safe response. Behind them, a photographer snapped a candid shot, me seated confidently, them standing awkwardly. The mayor came over again, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Emily, after dinner, I want you to join me for the donor introductions. They've been eager to meet you." The phrase, "eager to meet you," landed like a final drumbeat. In that moment, it was clear they were seeing me for the first time. Not as the girl in the thrifted dress, not as the quiet friend on the edge of the group photo, but as someone they couldn't afford to dismiss. When they finally left my table, I caught a glimpse of their reflection in the mirrored wall, 3 women retreating into the crowd, heads bent close, whispering the way they used to. Only now, their expressions weren't mocking. They were calculating. I stayed seated, the gold star bracelet resting against my wrist, feeling the weight of it like a seal on everything I'd built. This time, I didn't need to run to the deck outside or hide in the shadows. I was exactly where I belonged, under the lights, in full view, with no reason to shrink. By the time the gala wound down, I'd been introduced to half the city's most influential figures: judges, CEOs, philanthropists. My name passed easily between conversations, followed by words like brilliant, indispensable, visionary. When I finally stepped away from the donor circle to grab a glass of water, Madison reappeared. This time, her voice had lost its fake high pitch. "Emily," she started, a little breathless, we should really catch up. It's silly we haven't stayed in touch all these years." I tilted my head. Yes, silly. My tone was polite, but there was an unmistakable edge. Claire stepped forward, fumbling with her bracelet. "I think we owe you an apology. Back in the day, we weren't exactly welcoming." I let the silence hang for a beat, the way my mentor once taught me. Silence makes people reveal themselves. Jenna chimed in quickly. "We were young and stupid, but we've all grown since then. And, well, maybe we could help each other now." There was the real ask. I took a slow breath, weighing my words. Help works both ways. If you truly want to reconnect, it won't be on the terms we used to have. I don't keep people around who tear others down to feel taller. They shifted uncomfortably. Madison tried to smile. "Of course. Totally understand." I leaned in just slightly. "Here's what it would take. 1. You start showing up for people without expecting anything in return. 2. You stop the gossip, the exclusion, the little games. 3. You actually do something meaningful with your time. Volunteer. Mentor someone. Anything that isn't just for your Instagram feed." Madison's eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe. Claire just nodded, tight-lipped. Jenna looked like she wanted to protest, but didn't. "I'm not saying this for me," I continued. "I don't need your approval. But if you want to be in my life, you'll need to earn it by being the kind of women you should have been years ago." They murmured their agreement, each in her own stiff way, before drifting back into the crowd. I didn't expect instant transformation, but the terms were clear. The mayor rejoined me, smiling. "Everything all right?" "Perfect," I said, taking another sip of water. And it was not because I'd put them in their place, but because I'd done it without lowering myself to where I used to be. That night, for the first time, I realized power isn't about making others feel small. It's about never letting them make you feel small again. Over the next few months, I noticed subtle shifts. Madison started posting about a local women's shelter she'd begun volunteering at. Claire announced she was mentoring a young woman in her company. Even Jenna, whose life had once seemed like an endless carousel of brunches and rooftop parties, shared photos from a community cleanup project. Were they doing it for themselves or for appearances? I couldn't be sure. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that the cycle we'd lived in, pettiness, exclusion, shallow validation, had been interrupted. One chilly Saturday morning, as I walked through the farmer's market, I spotted Madison buying flowers. She hesitated, then walked over. "I'm trying," she said simply. "I know it might never be enough, but I am." I believed her. Not because her voice shook or because her eyes looked softer, but because for the first time, she didn't follow it with an invitation to lunch or a networking pitch. She just walked away, bouquet in hand. Later that week, I was back in my office, a space filled with quiet reminders of my journey. The polished wood desk I'd bought with my first major paycheck. The framed thank you letter from a women's leadership group. A shelf lined with books on strategy and history. And, right there in the center, resting on a velvet stand, my grandmother's gold star bracelet. I took it in my hand, running my fingers over the tiny engraving. The metal had dulled over the years, but it still caught the light, just enough to remind me. That girl who once stood shivering on a deck, clutching her phone to hear her grandmother's voice, that girl didn't vanish. She had simply grown into someone stronger, someone who no longer needed the room's approval to know her own worth. That night at the party, the mayor's announcement had been a public victory. But the real triumph was private, the quiet knowledge that I had rewritten the story. As I closed my office for the evening, I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist, feeling its familiar weight. My voice, steady, warm, and certain. Spoke the words I wished I could tell my younger self. They can ignore you all they want until the day they can't.